Okay. Hello, everybody. My name is Pav. Welcome to another episode of Man with Purpose podcast. Today, I have the great pleasure and honor to be joined by James Seed, who is a lifelong martial artist, Brazilian Jiu Jitsu purple belt, aspiring stoic, and right now unemployed, actually living in out of Georgia, Tbilisi. And also, he happens to be my coach. So, James, thank you very much for joining the show.
No worries, man. It's good to see you. I've been looking at some of the other people you've had on, and they actually do stuff. I'm just a guy who likes to grapple and read history books, so we'll see if you can get anything interesting out of it.
Oh, I'm sure we will. So actually, how we met with James was I was in Thailand maybe a year ago, and I always wanted to get into jiu-jitsu. So he was actually the person that I went into his dojo, into his gym. And then we kind of kicked it off from there. He was the person who was coaching me on my first jiu-jitsu competition. And this podcast has been, a long time coming. So I'm happy that we're finally able to do it through these, pandemic times. Maybe tell a little bit about the audience, a little bit about your story. How did you get into martial arts in the first place? How did all of this came about?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'd always had an interest in it. My favorite movie as a kid was Rocky IV. And I grew up with those 80s action movies. I was always really interested and looked up to Stallone and Schwarzenegger and those guys. My dad wasn't a particularly sporty guy, who was very, very much into the business and entrepreneurship, and that was his thing. So I kind of looked outside of that for more masculine role models, I guess, people. And that always appealed to me, and it kind of planted a seed, but I didn't really have much opportunity to train growing up. I went to a few karate classes and just got bored, standing around doing katas, and I wanted to spar and get hands-on and do stuff, so I kind of fell off that. I played rugby going through school. I was never the best rugby player. I was always more towards the endurance side of things. I'd run a lot of cross country and do things like that, but never the most explosive athletic person. But I wanted to be big and strong, so I started lifting weights at around 16. I was at a tennis camp in Barcelona for a year, and I realized I had all these guys around me that had a racket in their hands since they were 5 years old, and I was never going to be as good of a tennis player as them. But I reckon I could be stronger and fitter, so I spent all my time in the gym and started kind of going down that direction. And that really gave me an interest into personal training and strength coaching and stuff, which ended up becoming, what I did for a living when I left school. Mm-hmm. But I always had this seed of kind of martial arts in the background. And I remember one day, I think I was like 17, I was flipping through channels on Sky, and I came onto Bravo, and it was back in the day where the UFC pay-per-views would be aired for free the day after they were on in the States on Sunday nights. And I saw Ken Shamrock versus Tito Ortiz, the first fight. And I watched this, and I didn't really know. I knew of the UFC kind of peripherally, but I always thought Ken Shamrock was a pro wrestler, and did fake fighting and stuff. And so I didn't really understand what I was watching. It came on, and I'm just watching these two guys actually have a fight. It wasn't boxing. There wasn't a referee getting involved every time I went to the ground. There was ground and pound, and people were cut and bleeding, and it was on, and I just thought it was amazing. I'd never really seen anything like it. And so I kind of made a mental note that when I got the opportunity to train, I would. I was still at school at that point, and I still had a couple of years left to finish. So I did my A-levels, and when I ended up going to university in London, I kind of sought out like the University Judo Club and the Muay Thai Club, and started doing a little bit of stuff there. And then after that, I looked at some MMA gyms. There was a place called Pancras London with a guy who used to be in the UFC called Jesse Liadan, a French fighter, and London Shoot Fighters as well, and just started kind of picking up the basics. Took a couple of kind of low-level MMA fights. Didn't really know much of what I was doing, but I was kind of young and strong and lifting a lot of weights, and I knew the basics of grappling. And so won a few fights doing that and lost a couple too. And then life sort of got in the way. I had to try and make some money, and it kind of took me away from the martial arts side of things. I was always training physically, but I had a good few years gap. And then when I met Shannon, Shannon, my girlfriend, you guys were training together in Thailand. Mm-hmm. Kind of life got a bit more stable, and I was able to go back to training. And so the thing that I'd always had the most fun with was grappling. And I knew the basics of it. I think I thought I was an awful lot better than I actually was back then. And we were living in Wimbledon at the time, and I met some guys from Nova Forza Gym in Surrey, and went out there, you know, got the shit beaten out of me by a bunch of guys who were much smaller than I was, and absolutely just loved it, and went as much as I could from then on. And since then, I've just been training everywhere I've gone. We lived in Spain for a few years, and that's where I met my coach, Charlie Vivas, who is Pura Vida, you know, where we affiliated with in Thailand, and been training with him ever since. You know, whether I'm with him or not, I still consider him my coach for sure. You know, I'm always going to represent him and fly that flag. He's still in Spain. You know, he started up a school over there, which is doing really well. And you know, through Thailand, went over there and opened a school under him, which you trained at, and you know, had a really good time. It's one of the best times of my life, being able to coach all you guys, and really was valuable getting that teaching experience as well, because it was the first time I coached full time. And I always loved coaching through the personal training anyway, so I kind of had that element of it, and to be able to translate that into the more technical side of jiu-jitsu was great. And yeah, so that kind of brings us up till now. We moved from Thailand to Georgia. We're in Tbilisi now. Obviously, the pandemic's put a bit of a dent in the training, but I'm doing a lot of gymnastics and training at a gym called Legion out here, and just continuing that journey.
Wow. I just want to kind of touch upon the point about coaching. Like, and this isn't just coming from me. I was speaking with Alberto, I was speaking with Anton, like pretty much the people that we were training, kind of really regulars, like even Lewis. And everybody was like pretty much in agreement that you say you love coaching, but you really showed it as well. Like with the approach, you like super rigorous, like we shouldn't skip this and this and this. We got to stick with the basics. And it really showed at the time that, you know, you're saying it's the first time, but the passion, the what's the word I'm looking for? Yeah, the commitment towards really making sure that we as students became better, like really showed through. And that was really important. Like I think it's like the whole coach-student relationship is incredibly important. Whereas I had, you know, I'm like a white belt, obviously. I went to a couple of other schools, and it's a different vibe, right? It's a different vibe. So sometimes I kind of think, oh, maybe I took this a little bit for granted, having a good coach that is really looking after you, rather than, you know, because things get a little bit to the point where people are looking after the money so much, not so much after their students, if this makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I've always loved teaching and coaching, and I think that it really helped me that I'd been a personal trainer for so many years up to that point. And so you know, having that experience with people, you know, taught me how to deal with people and how to break things down in a way that people are going to understand. And obviously, you know, jiu-jitsu is another level of that, because it is so technical, you know, and you've got to make sure that people are understanding. And it still took me a while because there's a lot of things that you do in martial arts when you've been doing it for a while that you don't even realize you do. Like little automatic things that happen, and when people are learning from you, they might stop you in the middle and go, oh, but you're doing that and you didn't tell us to do that, and then you have to make that mental note of, oh, the next time I teach this, you know. And I have notebooks after notebooks after notebooks of teaching notes and things that I've done, because I think that's really important to be able to put that across. And I also felt like I had something to prove, you know, being a purple belt coach. You know, I'm not a black belt. And you know, I certainly wasn't back then. When I first got to Thailand, I'd actually gotten my purple belt quite recently, like just before I'd left Spain. So it was only, you know, a couple of months before that. And so I really wanted to make sure that I was doing the right thing and bringing you guys along the right way. And so the extra study in the background really helped with that, to break stuff down. And sometimes, you know, you don't necessarily need a black belt, especially when you're first coming up. Well, one of the things that I found helped me was that, you know, it wasn't a million years since I had first started and been a white belt and kind of take that. So I could relate a lot more, I think, to some of the struggles that you guys were having first starting out, and help you along that way too. And obviously I got a lot of help from my coach, Charlie, because he was the first coach that I had been under who looked at things in a really systematic way.
Mm-hmm.
which I think is incredibly important when it comes to something like jiu-jitsu, which is so vast as a martial art. There are so many positions and movements and variations on each of those different things that if you try and teach in an ad hoc manner, then nothing's ever going to come across. And it's going to take you years and years and years of trial and error as a student to actually be able to bring those things together in any kind of cohesive system. And you're just going to have to work it out for yourself. And a lot of schools teach that way. And I find that the sport, because it did not necessarily originate, but it was modified in Brazil. A lot of coaches, especially the Brazilian ones, have a very kind of laissez-faire manner about it, and the way they go about teaching. Insofar, you go in one day, okay, we're going to do an armbar from guard, and then you drill it 10 times and then you roll, and then the next day you go in, it's like, okay, we're doing an ankle lock, and today we're doing this sweep, and nothing really fits in together. And the first school I went to, a great guy, Brazilian coach, Ricardo da Silva, I really enjoyed training there, but it was a little bit like that. And what I learned was to get tough. I went through 6 months of really hard sparring just all the time, and I did pick some stuff up. But as soon as I got to training with Charlie, things became much more systematic and much easier to pick up because we were learning things in an order that made sense. We would do like a sweep into a pass, into a pinning position, into a submission, and that would be our week's training, through that. Or we would focus on one particular position for a week or a couple of weeks to make sure that you're at least taking some of the fundamentals away from that position before you move on. And that's when jiu-jitsu really started to make sense to me. And I wanted to take that, what Charlie had given to me, and pass that same kind of coaching on to you guys, because I knew that was the best way to learn.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I think that really showed through. I even addressed this in a previous podcast, that especially actually giving you as an example about the fact that you were super meticulous. I've never seen someone else take so much notes as you did, but also be able to teach in such a comprehensive, systematic manner to show us, how to get from A to B to Z in a very kind of very meticulous way. So yeah, I've got a similar experience in Bulgaria a little bit. Like I went to a couple of classes, and it's very little bit very sporadic, right? You do leg locks, and then the next time you do something else, and you're like, oh wow,
that's kind of whatever the coach feels like teaching on the day. I think a lot of these guys, that they've been doing jiu-jitsu for so long as well, and they just they want to have fun with their coaching, and the way to make it very interesting for them is they teach whatever the whim of the day is. And that's definitely a temptation for everybody. And it was for me, maybe I was going down a particular leg lock hole, and I'm like, oh, well, this is cool. I want to teach that, but I have to be disciplined and go, no, because this is not what's good for my students right now. What's good for my students is sticking with the half guard curriculum we've been doing for the last week for another week, because I'm pretty sure that not everybody's completely got it, and I don't want to move on until we've got this thing. And so having discipline as a coach to be able to put what your students need ahead of what you feel like doing because it's more fun for you. Now, that doesn't mean that on the occasional session you can just come in and go, fuck it, we're doing heel hooks today. That's cool too. but for the most part, you really do need to follow that system and make sure that you're being disciplined with yourself.
No, that's very important. Do you miss that experience right now? Like the whole coaching aspect?
You have no idea. I miss it so much. There were issues with living in Thailand for sure. The visa situation and stuff could be very complicated and annoying, and but that community that we had in that gym specifically, I really wanted to create a friendly atmosphere where people could come and be comfortable and train jiu-jitsu seriously, but then still have fun, afterwards, to be able to hang out on the mats and have a chat and kind of create a space for people where they were able to do that was really important. And I think everybody had fun, and I really do. I miss that a lot, and I will definitely be looking to open up a place in Tbilisi at some point. I don't know when that will be. There's only one gym here right now, so I think there's definitely room for another one. But yeah, I do miss it very much.
I'll be the first one to sign up, man. Send me the invite.
You need to get yourself to Tbilisi.
I will, no problem. We'll make it happen. Well, you mentioned to me when I think we kind of sporadically texted between this period of time that you were training there and you're training more wrestling. Are they more wrestling based there? Do they? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you hear me? Yeah,
Yeah.
Georgia's got a really strong wrestling and judo base. So
Mm.
I actually thought there would be more opportunity to train wrestling when I came over. What I found is, like, training at Legion, there are some good wrestlers there, but the classes are often very full, and there's not a lot of room to actually to do any wrestling.
Mm.
I was expecting to kind of find like some wrestling schools that I could go train at, but it's actually quite closed off. It's like, unless you're, you know, like training for the World Championships or training for the Olympics, and you're on that level, it's actually quite difficult to seek out good wrestling training. So I would like, but there are good wrestlers at the school, so I'm trying to train with them as much as I can. Wrestling is such an important part of the puzzle when it comes to jiu-jitsu. I hate this whole debate of, you know, what's better, wrestling or just doing both. Like,
Yeah.
you've got to be crazy if you don't think one can benefit the other.
Yeah, I think a big point. I mean, I don't know much about this because I'm still very, very, very early at the game. But yeah, doing one without the other, being able to take the fight to the ground if something happens in a situation where you have to protect yourself is incredibly important, right? So that's why we also started training, I think, towards the end, a little bit of takedowns and how to take it to the ground. Otherwise, you won't be able to implement what you've learned on the ground.
Yeah. Exactly. And also they complement one another in a lot. You know, a lot of mat wrestling techniques on the ground, you know, complement jiu-jitsu very well. A lot of the stuff that I taught you on the ground is wrestling based too, especially a lot of the front headlock stuff. And I don't want to go too far, you know, down technical jiu-jitsu rabbit holes. I'm sure there are plenty of people listening to this who aren't interested in that. But when you start looking at the two arts in various positions, there are a lot of similarities. For example, if you want to play butterfly guard, what are you doing from butterfly guard? You're like hip heisting to front headlock positions. You're arm dragging. You're looking for snap downs. You're looking for all the same things you're doing when you're standing up wrestling with very similar grips. It's just you're sitting down on your butt, right? So if you know how to wrestle and you want to translate that to butterfly guard, or if you know how to play a good butterfly guard, a lot of that's also going to translate to wrestling. So definitely do both as much as you can, and that will translate. Now, I've never had like just bringing it back to the coaching aspect for 1 second. I've never really had a specific wrestling coach. I'm not a great wrestler, you know. I have a few things that I'm all right at, but it's mainly like to bring it to the floor so that I can work my jiu-jitsu or stop myself from getting taken down by somebody else. But I think the reason that I enjoy coaching so much is because I love to travel, and I don't particularly like to work. If you classify work as kind of, you know, sitting at a desk and earning salary, it's just never appealed to me. I've always, you know, valued experiences and travel and things like that over money. I'd rather be poor and a bit freer. And luckily, I met somebody in Shannon who agrees with me, you know, and we were able to leverage some assets into providing us with enough money that we can kind of have that freedom. We rented a flat in London and just kind of moved on. First we went to Spain and then Thailand and now here. And because we like to travel and we like to live in places that are cheap to live so that our money can go further and we can have a good quality of life where we are. Eventually, the south of Spain, where we first moved to, just became a bit untenable because the pound was getting weaker against the euro. There was a lot of Brexit talk, and it wasn't necessarily practical for me to stay there. Even though that's where Charlie was, that's where my coach was, and that's where I was getting my best training. And Shannon and I kind of sat down one day and looked at each other, and it's like, we're either going to have to get real jobs or we're going to have to move, you know, somewhere cheaper. And the obvious answer was we're going to move somewhere cheaper. So that's how we ended up in Thailand. And because of that kind of traveling lifestyle, I don't necessarily get the benefits of being able to have Charlie with me wherever I go and always have super consistent coaching. So I've had to always take it upon myself to do a shit ton of research. So I'm always like looking at instructionals with a notepad. I'm always like on YouTube. I'm always trying to kind of expand my game. And through trial and error, seeing what works, doing a lot of drilling, And because of that, I think it makes it easier for me to impart that kind of information to my students, because I've made those mistakes myself, because I'm having to be self-coached. And so, you know, I'm really looking forward. It's been a couple of years now since I've been able to roll with Charlie. And so I'm really looking forward to going and rolling with him again and showing, you know, what I've added on to that really good base that he gave me, you know, all the new stuff. And, you know, it's not about the belts and the promotions and stuff. It's more about just kind of, you know, doing justice by what he gave to me, you know, that base, and then showing, look what I did with it, you know, like this is awesome. So I think that ability to just kind of analyze and try stuff out and, you know, fuck a bunch of stuff up and then come back until you eventually come out with something yourself, and doing all of that yourself, all of that research, all of that note taking really does help with coaching.
Wow, that's a beautiful dynamic. You know, taking something from a very good coach, developing it and kind of molding it in your own style, adding to that, and then going back and, you know, having this rendezvous together. That will be pretty special, I'm sure.
Yeah, and it doesn't hurt that it's in the south of Spain, and we can go chill and have a beer on the beach afterwards either.
There we go. Yeah, mixing both, right?
Absolutely.
Whilst we're on this notion of wrestling, you know, I was preparing for one of the videos, and I couldn't help but notice, like, I started like checking, like, so many great men throughout history have been wrestlers. Like they kind of, like Plato, for example. Plato was, you know, combining stoicism, like philosophy, with like wrestling. It's such a, like, martial art is like been practiced since the dawn, right? So it's been something that's been a lifelong journey for a lot of men throughout history, I think.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. It's, you know, I can't remember the exact quote of the place I was going on about, you know, somebody who doesn't, you know, fulfill their physical potential is essentially wasting a huge part of their life. And I agree. It's always been something that's been important to me. You know, from the first time I watched Rocky IV and saw Sylvester Stallone beat up Ivan Drago, you know, yeah. I was like, well, that's a man. You know, that's what a man does. That's what a man should look like. You know, and so I had this kind of this idea, and I do believe that every person, you know, not just men, they do have a duty to themselves to be at least physically capable on a base level. You know, look after your health. You know, try not to put yourself in a position where you get winded walking up a set of stairs. And if you can go beyond that and, you know, learn how to defend yourself and find some enjoyment in it too. I think a lot of people look at working out as a punishment. I saw something the other day on Instagram that was like, you know, working out or, you know, physical training is a celebration of what your body can do, not a punishment for what you ate. And it's so true. You know, but we've taken the enjoyment out of it. You know, back in the day, the ancient Greeks, they looked at it as a celebration. You know, the kids would grow up wrestling, boxing, and I don't think that the ancient world, particularly Greece, gets enough credit for its contributions to the martial arts. Everyone seems to look at Japan and China and what came out of there, and no doubt, you know, they did make significant contributions. But if you look at the ancient Greeks doing pancration and combining that with wrestling, they were doing arm bars 2,500 years ago. You know, they put a lot into it. And
wow.
You can look at obvious examples like the Spartans, you know, who had their own issues in their society. But your video the other day, which is actually what prompted us to get in touch about this podcast, where you're talking about the need for tough men. There are a lot of people, not nowadays, but who espouse the virtues of war. But when they talked about war in the ancient world, they weren't talking about the kind of wars that we have nowadays. You know, the times have changed an awful lot with the advent of nuclear weapons and mutually assured destruction, firearms, you know, all these kind of things. We're no longer talking about two armies meeting up on a battlefield in different uniforms and having a battle. One side wins, one side loses, and then one side gives the other the respect of being able to come in and claim their dead and their wounded and come back and kind of things are decided then. And I'm not trying to glorify ancient battle. It was obviously horrific, and, you know, lots of people died and things. But things back then oftentimes could be decided in an afternoon of fighting. You know, they weren't long drawn out guerrilla wars of insurgency where people are just being, you're involved in it for years and years and years. I mean, look how long there's been conflict going on in Iraq now. It's absolutely crazy. These are the kind of wars that kind of chip away at your soul rather than create virtue. There's not much heroism out there anymore. And so, war and that preparation for war is something that used to be an innate part of being a man in society in the ancient world, and it was seen as something virtuous. We don't have that ability anymore because war has changed so much. And obviously, I'm not going to go so far as to condone that we should all pick up a sword and a shield and meet on the battlefield and go chop each other up. But what martial arts, and when I say martial arts, I'm talking specifically about those martial arts that involve pressure testing and sparring, whether it be boxing, jiu-jitsu, wrestling, Muay Thai, and any of those. Obviously, I'm biased. I like jiu-jitsu, so I'll say jiu-jitsu out of all of those. But it provides you with that physical training, that preparation for combat, the pressure testing of combat itself, and the camaraderie of being able to do it in a team, which I think is so sorely missing from society in general, but particularly men. And I think we're living in an age now where a lot of men, they still have that ancient hardware, and it's being shoved into a modern society. And there's a lot of anxiety and guys who don't really know what to do with themselves.
Wow. Just like mini like explosions and aha moments whilst I'm listening to what you said. Yeah.
I've actually, if you've got time, I've got a good quote here, which I really like, which
Please.
kind of espouses this. And this is from, it's from a novel. It's not from a historical figure, but it kind of really encompasses what I'm trying to say. And this is from Stephen Pressfield's book, Gates of Fire, which is about the Battle of Thermopylae and the Greco-Persian Wars, which is my favorite period in history anyway. And they're in one of the Spartan mess halls. The Spartans used to, almost like in boarding school, they used to live together in these mess halls and eat together. And they would have their own kind of groups within their society. And they're talking about the benefits of compassion and the benefits of war. And one of the Spartan soldiers stands up and says this. He says, "Mankind, as it is constituted, is a boil and a canker. Observe the specimens in any nation other than Sparta. Man is weak, greedy, craven, lustful, and prey to every species of vice and depravity. He will lie, steal, cheat, murder, melt down the very statues of the gods, and coin their gold as money for whores. Fortunately, God in his mercy has provided a counterpoise to our species' innate depravity. That gift, my young friend, is war. War, not peace, produces virtue. War, not peace, purges vice. War and preparation for war call forth all that is noble and honorable in a man. It unites him with his brothers and binds them in selfless love, eradicating in the crucible of necessity all which is base and ignoble. There in the holy mill of murder, the meanest of men may seek and find that part of himself, concealed beneath the corrupt, which shines forth brilliant and virtuous, worthy of honor before the gods. Do not despise war, my young friends, nor delude yourself that mercy and compassion are virtues superior to Andrea, to manly valor." And I just love that quote because it really does. We are missing all of that. It's not good to glorify conflict, but conflict is an innate part of being a human and particularly being a man. I think. And if you strip all of that away, and not only do you strip it away, but you condemn it as toxic masculinity or anything like that, then you really are eroding a huge part of what props up our psyche as human beings. And I think that's an issue.
Wow. Yeah, it is super big issue. I can't remember what I read this, but the guy was going on and saying something like, if you want peace, you have to prepare for war, right? And I was even talking with Shanna about this, that, she said, Coach James is constantly honing skills to be able to, not necessarily to protect yourself, although that plays a huge factor in it, but yeah, to get all these other secondary benefits, like the camaraderie. For example, when we were doing the competition, preparing for the competition, man, that to me fulfilled the dream. Like being there on the actual competition, like the whole camaraderie, that's something that only someone who's been through a competition of some sort with other people together, especially with other men, because I think pretty much everybody was, everybody was a guy there except for Shan.
Yeah, I think when you were there, Shan was the only woman training.
Yes, yes, and that it's one thing of explaining it, but a totally different thing of actually going through something and really experiencing it together. And I think that's so crucial. Like I saw that as like a mini rites of passage, right? Going through all of those motions of preparing, and you like yelling at you, like telling me like you need to like be like more sharp on the underhooks or yeah, and the passes that was an incredible experience. Like I really fulfilled the dream back then. And I think what do you think, not just men but also people in general should at least strive? I'm on the kind of the stance that everybody should train martial arts regardless. What are some of the benefits that
I would
you
like
got
to
from
see
that?
it be a part of the school curriculum for sure.
I think
At
bullying is
least the
gonna go
basic.
down.
Yeah, I agree. I see a lot of anti-bullying campaigns, going on, and they all come from a good place. They all come from people who are genuinely trying to put a stop to it. But much like war, bullying and the hierarchy, especially within children, is a natural part of being human. This is what happens. You're never going to eradicate it completely. It's just not realistic to assume that that's a possibility. And so if you arm every student with the ability to defend themselves, then I do believe that you would see the kind of the rate of bullying go down significantly. And some people might argue, well, oh, you're just taking the bullies and teaching them how to bully more efficiently. I completely disagree with that. For starters, one of the tenets of martial arts is discipline and respect. And so that is going to take a lot of those people who might be predisposed to bullying in the first place and put them off doing that. Even if you then take a very small minority of those who are still going to go out and be bullies, and they want to go out and prey upon other people, who are they going to prey upon? Even if they're bigger and stronger than another kid that they want to bully, if that kid genuinely knows how to defend themselves and how to fight, if he knows how to box and grapple, that's not going to be easy. And the basic psychology of bullies, as everyone knows, is they want to pick easy targets. If nobody is an easy target, then you're going to see that rate of bullying go down significantly. You're never going to eradicate it. It's just not realistic to think that we can. But I think we can really reduce the amount of it by putting a decent level of martial arts into the curriculum. And I think that just physical education in general in schools across the world is piss poor at the moment.
Yeah.
We don't put nearly enough emphasis on it, and I think that's a problem.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it's important to say that we're not espousing like violence, but like being able to defend yourself, training martial arts, doing something with the body, especially something as intimate as jiu-jitsu, I think has more benefits than people can actually imagine, unless they've actually tried it. Like the first time I tried it, I was like, whoa, like this is like amazing. Like I don't say this about a lot of things, but the first time I was on the mat, like I just fell in love. And you can see why it becomes a little bit, there's an addictive nature to it.
Definitely.
I was listening to John Danaher. He was saying that, the fact that you're trying to solve problems at the same rate and speed that the other opponent is trying to create problems is the thing that makes jiu-jitsu so addictive, right? Because you have to constantly even think ahead of what your opponent might come up with.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, everybody's got violent tendencies within them. What we can do is try and hone those into a more productive and kind of respectful outlet. If it's important, one of the things jiu-jitsu does, and this is something that Shannon was saying to me, is that when she first started, she'd never done any martial arts before, and to her, any kind of fighting was a violent act between two people who had animosity towards one another. And when she started doing jiu-jitsu, she realized, oh, this is combat, but it's done through camaraderie. We're doing it with a respect for one another. And so she was able to kind of separate those two things. And if you can do that in young men from a young age, then wouldn't that be great? Because young men are going to be violent anyway. And if you don't give them a reasonable outlet, it's going to come out in really negative ways. And so by giving them an opportunity to do it through martial arts, it gives them a much more positive outlet. you can't try and suppress it. That always ends up going wrong. You know, that's how you end up with school shooters and people shooting up post offices. You know,
Mm.
you need to give them an outlet, and martial arts, particularly the grappling martial arts, because it gives them an opportunity to get hands on immediately. I think is really beneficial.
Yeah, I agree. I see, like, even taking the shootings, I see that much more as a mental problem than a gun control problem, right? People who have experienced maybe traumas or haven't had like a father figure to look after them, or, you know, haven't done anything to do with physical contact sports, like, you know, full contact sports like martial arts, could go into a very bad rabbit hole, you know, and it ends up, you know, people, especially men, you know, end up like taking time bombs, and all of a sudden they end up on the news. But that's a whole separate topic in and of itself.
Yeah, it's very easy, you know, especially in the States, for people to fall through the cracks like that, which, you know, historically has not been the case, either because we lived in smaller tribes, you know, and everybody looked out for each other, or there's better organization in terms of, you know, sports and organized activities and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I went to boarding schools for the most part, and every day, you know, we woke up at 7:30, and from that time through until the evening, we always had something to do. And so when I hear like kids are getting out of school at like 2:30, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and I'm like, what are they doing? I don't understand.
Yeah.
Like that is time that needs to be taken up with, you know, something. If they're done with their academic lessons, ideally physical, you know. Team sports are great too. You know, I think those teach you great lessons also, but just put more emphasis on the physical, you know, to make sure you're a well-rounded human. You know, the whole idea of the warrior poet. Academics are incredibly important, and, you know, but it's no more or less important than the physical side of things if you want to be a well-rounded human being. You know, you don't want to be a complete meathead, and you don't want to be a social recluse with his nose in a book all day. You want to try and allow those two sides of yourself to meet. And that's what creates well-rounded humans.
Yeah, I think it also, jiu-jitsu teaches you so much more than just be able to defend yourself, right? There's so many lessons that you can take from jiu-jitsu and apply in life that are just invaluable, I think.
Yeah, I think the biggest benefit it's given me is it taught me how to learn better. You know, I spoke earlier on about having to, you know, go through trial and error and teach myself a lot. And as a consequence of that, like as an adult, it's awakened in me a kind of second wave of interest in academics. You know, specifically history and philosophy and things like that. Because of, I don't know, I guess it just kind of kickstarted a part of my brain where it's like, oh, well, you're an adult now, you're learning this is fun. You were forced to do this as a child, but now nobody's forcing you. You're just doing it for yourself. And it kind of really encouraged me to move on and start learning again. And I think, you know, everybody always talks about trying to be a lifelong learner, you know, making sure you're still acquiring skills as you grow up and get older, which I do think is really important, because what else is life about? You know, if you take away the base system of, well, you know, I'm born and I reach puberty and then I, you know, have children and then I do some other shit and I die. You know, that's really the base level of what we're here for. But if you want a fulfilling life and you want to take it beyond that, you know, what's really helped me is the constant acquisition of new skills, whether that be knowledge, whether that be something physical. Like right now, I'm also doing a course on the gymnastics rings to be able to kind of, you know, get good on those. And that's something that's really helped me when I haven't been able to do jiu-jitsu through the pandemic. But just constantly trying to better yourself in little ways, acquire new skills, new knowledge, learn a new language, you know, do something. And because jiu-jitsu is so vast, you know, you could train for 30 or 40 years and still be learning. And it's always evolving too, because there are so many people doing it. It really gives you an outlet for that constant acquisition of new skills, because there are always new rabbit holes to go down with the art itself. And once you start doing that there, it kind of it works those learning muscles, and just kind of almost by osmosis, without realizing it, you will start to pick that up in other areas. And that has probably been its most positive overall effect on me as a person.
Oh, that's beautiful. Like, I remember I had so much more, like after a practice, everything seems to be so simple, right? Everything is kind of a little bit dialed down because you've been through something so difficult that afterwards, like, oh, I feel like I can deal with anything afterwards. That's kind of the feeling I got after a practice.
Yeah,
Like a
yeah,
very,
for sure. There's, the feeling that I used to get, wherever I trained, it was always the post training walk or drive. Like when I was in Spain with Charlie, I would go in, like, would have this really hard training session. I'd get in the sauna, I'd have a shower, have something to eat, and walk out to my car. And my drive home was I was just in the best mood, I could possibly be in. We've got music playing, I'm singing along, and I just don't have a care in the world. And the same thing in Thailand, like we finish training, I'd clean the gym, get on the bike, head home around the moat in Chiang Mai, and I'd just be just in the best mood, and
mm,
that's that's really important too,
mm-hmm,
and that's that you don't have to do jiu-jitsu to get that. I'm biased because I love it, but if you want to run, if you want to lift weights, if you want to do CrossFit, if you want to box, if whatever it is for you that gets you to that stage, it's really helpful to have that feeling at least a few times a week because it's so rare
mm-hmm.
to find that. And so many people are so busy. It's just to carve out that 20 minutes of your drive home after you've trained where you just feel like nothing can touch you, nothing can bother you. That's a beautiful thing. If you could put that in a pill that didn't have any adverse side effects, you'd pay $1 million a pill for that.
I'm sure. Yeah, I've realized that, I was in London, I was training there. I actually started training. Like I go through a lot of anxiety most of the times, and actually even back in Thailand, we were training together. If I was anxious about something, like just getting into the body and like doing something very physically difficult with another man or a woman for that matter, really dulled everything. Like there was not even like a single drop of anxiety afterwards. Like everything is just like so calming, and yeah, it's a great feeling. I didn't really understand like people when they say like I don't like training. Maybe it's the fun factor, like you said. Like I think, and again, maybe because I train, I like to stay active. Like unless you're like completely incapacitated or you have some kind of a genetic motor disease, there's no excuse not to work out or to get into shape. So yeah.
You can always do something. I feel like at this point as well, I should point out something else. When it comes to jiu-jitsu, because
Mm,
I do love it, and it does have a lot of positives. But again, it's this idea of being well-rounded, because it's also easy to take jiu-jitsu and run with it. And I did this for a long time, where it becomes like the center of your identity, and it's such an important thing in your life that when that thing isn't going well, it can
mm,
really affect the rest of your life too. And so all those positives are there, for sure. And if you treat it with respect, and train the right way, and also address the other aspects of your life, that it is. But I've also gone through stages where I've kind of put all of my eggs in that jiu-jitsu basket. And it hasn't been going well, and it's I've lost sleep over it. I stay awake at night thinking about something that I messed up, or
wow.
what I want to work on next, and I'll
Mm,
start having imaginary sparring battles in my head. Or I wonder if this grip would work. And the next thing I know, it's 4 o'clock in the morning. I'm not getting any sleep.
ooh,
And so it's, again, like I talked earlier on, you don't just want to be the meathead, right? And you don't just want to be the bookworm. You want to kind of be well-rounded. It's important to have things in your life to balance that out. And one of the important things, I think we'll get into kind of the stoicism thing that has helped, introducing that kind of philosophy. But philosophy aside, also just the other things that I was talking about, take what jiu-jitsu gives you in terms of that hunger to learn and to improve,
mm,
and
mm,
apply that to other areas, whether it be a job that you love, your academic study, gardening, chess, another hobby, so that if jiu-jitsu isn't going that well, or maybe you get injured and you can't train for a while, or there's a pandemic going on and you can't train for a while, it doesn't drive you nuts, because I've been down that too. And jiu-jitsu is very addictive, and it's so much fun. It can be obsessive.
mm.
So that's something that I've kind of tried to do more recently, over the last kind of couple of years, and that's been very important.
Yeah, good. Yeah, balance. That's a good way to put it, because yeah, sometimes you can get like with everything, right? If you take it too far, it begins to kind of give side effects and like maybe take over your life, which is not what you want to do, right? Um,
Yeah. And the kind of people who do get obsessed with the jiu-jitsu, like me, they're the kind of people that can get obsessed with lots of things. You know, they just have a
yeah.
personality that takes them down that rabbit hole and doesn't let them out sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, that's where stoicism came in, and that's why I started going and studying history and kind of just trying to broaden myself as a human and take more
Mm-hmm.
pleasure in other parts of life too, so that
Mm.
I wasn't always beating myself up at 3 o'clock in the morning because I didn't manage to finish a submission on somebody who I didn't think was as good as me.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Yeah, I can imagine that could like really eat your soul if you let it, right? You jump straight into it, and it can go on for a long time. Um,
Absolutely.
Tell me a little about stoicism, because when I initially started training with you, I've already read a little bit about stoicism, Marcus Aurelius, obviously, but I didn't know that about you. And whilst I was training, you mentioned it one time, like, oh, he knows about stoicism. So how did that came about?
Well, I kind of it had been in my kind of like jiu-jitsu, you know, it had been in my periphery for a while, but I never really paid too much attention to it. I actually started looking into it more seriously when we were in Thailand.
Hmm.
Bizarrely enough, because Darren Brown was on the Joe Rogan podcast, and he just talked a little bit about it, and he just seemed like a very calm, put together individual, and so I just thought I would look more into it. The resource, and I would recommend this to anybody who's interested in stoicism, that really kind of put me over the edge was a podcast by a guy called Chris Fisher, who has the Stoicism on Fire podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And his type of stoicism, he called it traditional stoicism, where he tries to keep it as close to the ancient form of stoicism as is kind of possible in the modern world. And one of the things that has always kind of, well, I've always been a little bit jealous of religious people insofar as their ability to have kind of an almost blind faith, and you know, the whole God has a plan thing and everything. And I've always been very mistrustful of organized religion. I've never been able to put myself over the edge to actually to commit to it. I've always been suspicious, and you know, I think you and I both know that there's been a lot of evil done in the name of you know, quote unquote God, whatever
Yes.
you believe that to be. And I started listening to Chris Fisher's podcast, and he came at it from a very singular or similar rather angle to me, insofar as he'd had a lot of bad experiences with religion. And when he found Stoicism and started reading Marcus Aurelius, you know, if you've read it, you know, he talks a lot about God in meditations. And so he was a little bit put off by it. But when he started to explain kind of about the Stoic God and the concept of God, it made me a lot more comfortable. And he talked about the Stoic God being synonymous with nature. You know, it is the universe. It is everything. It's all permeating. It's not a being. There is no afterlife. You know, there's none of this. It's just more of an energy that kind of surrounds us. And that if you come at Stoicism, or particularly traditional Stoicism, and I'll kind of talk about the differences in a minute, but if you come into traditional Stoicism from an Abrahamic religion like Islam or Christianity, you're going to find that the God idea in Stoicism is going to be not enough for you, because it's not an all-powerful, omnipotent being who takes a particular interest in you, or you know, anything like that. And if you come at it
Mm-hmm.
from an atheistic standpoint, like I did, you might find that kind of the Stoic philosophy and the God within is too much for you. But that over time, if you kind of research into it, you may find yourself being quite comfortable with it. And so I really appreciated that, and I kind of thought about it. And one of the things he said that really resonated with me was that if you want to practice traditional Stoicism, you cannot separate the theology, because
Mm.
they are completely intertwined. Otherwise, you're just doing kind of CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. And Stoicism is not built for that. It's built with a moral framework in mind, which includes the fact that we live in a providential universe, and things don't just occur randomly. Now, I don't know if I fully gone over to the side where I believe that we live in a providential universe where there is a grand plan and everything is moving towards something better. But I can certainly live as if there is something like that.
Yeah.
That's not a problem for me. And also, I don't really know what difference it makes whether there is a providential God moving everything towards the betterment of humanity and the universe as a whole. But there is a huge universe out there, an infinite universe out there with matter colliding and people interacting and other beings and things that are just so far beyond my scope of control that I can never hope to understand or control them in any way. And is that really different to whether there was a God organizing it all? I'm just an ant looking up at a skyscraper. You know, I don't know that it makes any difference. And so the ability to relinquish control in that way, you know, made a huge difference to me. And that is essentially that what they call the dichotomy of control, being able to understand what is and what isn't within our control and only focus on that very small bundle of things that are within our control is kind of at the center of stoicism. And that really kind of piqued my interest, and I began to go down the rabbit hole a bit more. And so I've been researching this idea of traditional stoicism as opposed to a kind of modern secular stoicism, which surprised even me, but I do like it.
Okay. So what exactly is the difference between those two?
So like more modern secular versions of stoicism are essentially just cognitive behavioral therapy, right? The reframing of things. So stoicism talks a lot about they have the three disciplines, for example, which is the disciplines of assent, the discipline of desire, and the discipline of action. The discipline of assent is what you allow into your psyche, like essentially what you allow to bother you. You know, assent being I give assent to allow this into, you know, or not into myself. The discipline of desire, which is about not projecting your desire towards external things like money or you know, a good job or anything, but that it's still, you should still work towards them. And if the universe puts that within your grasp, then you're perfectly entitled to go for it. But if you spend all your time projecting your desire towards it, there are a million external factors which mean that you might not get that job. You know, anything could happen, and then you're bound to be disappointed because you projected all of your desires and expectations towards it. And then the discipline of action, which is being able to, first of all, use the discipline of assent to decide what you allow into your psyche, and then the discipline to be able to act appropriately towards what has happened, which is using the four disciplines of stoicism, which are wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance. And you can kind of use those four you know, pillars of stoicism to be able to act appropriately towards situations and not just fly off the handle emotionally because you haven't taken the time to accurately assess what's going on. And the essential difference between traditional stoicism and modern stoicism is that traditional stoicism really puts a lot of focus on the ethics, as in the four fundamental virtues, which are wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance. And so anything that you do has to be done with those things in mind. Whereas modern stoicism or CBT is just essentially like a psychological tool in order to reframe things for you to kind of relieve anxiety or anything like that. But when you take away the theological aspect of it, you could use CBT or modern stoicism to be a better criminal. You know, if you wanted to be, you could use it to be a better corrupt politician. You could use it to be whatever you wanted because you've taken away the theological and moral context that is such an important part of the original stoicism as the ancient Stoics perceived it.
I really like that, you know, living with a certain code, you know. I think that's really important because nowadays we don't really have that. I was even having a conversation with my mom, and exactly, I had the exact same thought about, because she found God, and she's not in a very traditional religious sense, but she quotes it oftentimes, and I can see, wow, she's like, she doesn't experience any fear because she puts her faith in God. And that, like, likewise, like what she said as well, made me a little bit jealous. Like, that I can see that being as a very strong driver for her to do certain things and to achieve certain things. So the way you put like traditional stoicism, I think, is a lot more appealing to myself, and I'm sure to a lot of people listening right now.
Yeah, and
Mm.
I would encourage people, you know, if you are interested in it, to go and listen to Chris Fisher's podcast. It's on iTunes or wherever, because he explains it a lot better than I have, you know, in a very thoughtful way. And anybody who's kind of coming at it from an atheistic point of view, like I was, I think you'll find it very interesting, and it might at least pique your interest. As I said, I'm not sure I've completely gone over to the providential universe and there is a God side of things, but it's certainly opened my
Mm-hmm.
mind and my heart a lot more kind of towards it, and I don't count it out. And it certainly means that I can live as if that is the truth.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can see the benefits of doing something. I mean, like martial arts, right? You like, I think Bruce Lee was saying, right? Take whatever is working and, you know, make it your own and kind of mix it up with what you think is best. I really totally chopped this up, but he said he said something similar. So um,
I get you. I know what you mean.
yeah, go and look it up, guys. Like, come on, do yourself a favor. What do you think, like, jiu-jitsu stands today in terms of ethics and, you know, this kind of very moral, virtuous motives that you espouse, which I certainly feel drawn to, doesn't seem to, I don't know, maybe it's not as popular right now, and especially in jiu-jitsu and martial arts. The whole notion of honor and the whole notion of, you know, doing the right thing, not like constantly having to smack talk people, which, you know, I guess that there is fun in that, but the whole virtuous notion of this is a martial art and, you know, you want to give honor to the other person, it seemed to be a little bit disappeared, or maybe it's just me.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really complicated question. I assume you're talking about Gordon Ryan.
Well,
But
not just that, but like also this other dude, what's his name? Dylan
Dylan
Dan or something.
Dennis, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason why Marcelo kicked Dylan Dennis out of the school.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like it. It's not for me. I understand why they do it. You know,
Yeah.
jiu-jitsu athletes, they work incredibly hard. You know, just as hard as any other athlete's going to work
Mm.
for very little money. You know, there's not money in it unless you have a very successful school or you're Gordon Ryan and you're winning ADCC and kind of
Mm.
putting yourself out there. There's not a lot of money, and so in order to, you know, try and make yourself financially comfortable, some people are willing to compromise their ethics, or
Yeah.
maybe they're not compromising their ethics. Maybe they think it's perfectly okay. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
In order to bring attention to themselves and their brand and make people watch them. And the thing is, people are going to keep doing what they get rewarded for. You know,
That's a good
people
point.
tune in to
Yeah.
watch Dylan Dennis fight either
Mm.
because they want to see him win or mostly because they want to see him lose. You know,
Mm-hmm.
the same thing with Conor McGregor in MMA. You know, this is just the way life works. I understand why people do it. I don't like it personally.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I just like to see people win. You know, I like to see people
Mm.
go out there
Mm.
and express whatever martial art they're doing to the highest of their ability, and I'll follow you because of that. You know, my favorite fighters in the UFC have always been guys like Robbie Lawler or Dan Henderson or Carlos Condit or guys like that that kind of, you know, they don't talk to you. And now I love Justin Gaethje. I think he's great because he goes out there, he puts on a spectacular show, and he's just a hell of a nice guy.
Mm-hmm.
I'm far more likely to follow you because of that. But I'm also guilty of it. You know, when Conor McGregor talks a lot of shit and he goes and fights Eddie Alvarez, I wanted to see Eddie Alvarez knock the shit out of him, but
Yeah.
unfortunately that didn't happen. So, you know, I think we all feed into this behavior of this shit talking, whether we think we do or not, and whether we like it or not.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's just an inevitable part of it turning from a kind of a niche group activity in a dojo somewhere to it being on national television. But also it's important, I think, very important that we don't idealize kind of the masters of the past too much
Mm.
either. You know, let's not forget that Rickson Gracie was out there in Brazil getting in street fights all the time. You know, people hated the Gracies. They were considered thugs. And now what happens? You know, when you walk into a Gracie bar stool and everybody's lined up like it's a fucking cult bowing to pictures of Carlos Gracie. It's kind of weird. So,
Mm-hmm.
you know, it's important to strike a balance that, yeah, I don't like all the shit talking. And if it were my students going out there and doing it, I definitely wouldn't condone it. But we also, can't make this unrealistic example of kind of the forefathers of the sport, that they were all complete saints. And so
Mm.
I've never been somebody who's really into kind of all the crazy rules that some dojos have, that where it gets a little bit culty. I think it's just important that you kind of march to the beat of your own drum, and you if you're a coach, you open a school, and you will attract the people to your school that
Mm-hmm.
like the way that you do things. And it will put some people off, and that's just the way it is. And you just have to kind of stay true to yourself, and that's it. That's kind of all I really think about it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I think your vibe attracts your tribe. Even when we were in the gym in Thailand, you see different people coming in, and some were a little bit more, let's call them bullies, but then you kind of had to keep a check on that ego at some point. Just say, dude, we don't do this the way we don't do things the way you think it should be done, right? So you always kind of give him that gentle nudge to say, look, you need to take a little bit easier, which I really liked. Not everybody has a certain moral or certain code that they live by, and they have to be disciplined to follow, to be able to say to people, listen, you should be a little bit more careful with that. I really love that.
And I think that if you're picking a school to go to, and you really like kind of the much more old school martial arts mentality of like an old karate school, where you go in and you can only tie your belt facing away from the mat, and you're going to bow to a picture of Elio Gracie, like all in the line. The one that always really cracks me up is you're never allowed to ask a higher belt to roll. That one always drives me absolutely crazy.
Really?
There are so many that still do that. Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Like as if they're better than you, or it's just there are rules like that which I really don't like. And like
how are you supposed to get better if you don't roll?
Well, yeah, exactly. Exactly. What it really says to me is that if that person doesn't want to roll, they're too weak-minded to say no, because their ego is too attached to it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So I don't like stuff like that, but I also don't think everything should be too loosey-goosey. Like how important it was for me that people show up on time. For example, I think that's just the first part of respect, of just valuing other people's time as you do your own. When we train seriously, and we show each other respect. We bow to each other, and we shake each other's hands, just a mark of respect. But also then after that, we're all friends, and we're all equals on and off the mats. There's no grand hierarchy. So if you're starting out in the sport, try out a few gyms if you want to. Don't just stick to the first place you go to. If you feel a little bit uncomfortable and you feel like there might be something better out there, that gym might be perfect for somebody else. But for you might need to look a bit further afield, and just see how you like it.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like everybody in Bulgaria would say, for every train there's passengers. So definitely, yeah, I remember you even gave the same advice to me when I was in London, like looking for different gyms, just try it out, see what the coaches, instructors are like, and then make a decision based on that.
Yeah, exactly. And there's one thing that I really don't like, and I would advise people not to go to schools like that. And people will know specifically some of the gyms that I'm talking about. But if you walk into a school and they force you to only train in their branded gear, like for example, you have to buy their $200 gi, which probably won't be of the best quality, and their own rash guard and their own, all of this, and they won't let you train unless you wear those things. That is probably not a great idea for anybody, because it's really, really strange to me. The reason that I like jiu-jitsu above and beyond a lot of other martial arts is because for the most part, gyms treat people like adults, and because it has that kind of freedom, it's allowed all these really cool, like small niche companies like Scramble and Mikatsu and Tatami and all of these things to come out with all these cool rash guard designs and stuff. And so it's created all these cool little cottage industries that we as jiu-jitsu players get to support by buying their stuff and kind of expanding the community. And I really like that. And if you walk into a school which only allows you to wear their branded equipment when they go in, it takes away from that. And I kind of feel like they're treating you like a child. And those are also the kind of gyms who are likely to tell you, oh, you're not allowed to go train anywhere else, which is another thing that is also a little bit culty, and I've I've never liked. I feel like if your coach is telling you that, then there's a good chance that he's, you know, pretty insecure, and that he feels like you might find something better somewhere else and not come back.
Yeah.
So yeah, there are little things to watch out for, but
Yep.
the uniform policy thing is always the big one to me.
Yeah, these are all new things to me, but I can imagine how, you know, people would fall into something like this, and this is where kind of the politics come in and the money comes in, which again, you need to be able to sustain a school in order if you want to progress it and make sure it survives. But yeah, sometimes people take it too far to the point where it just becomes a cult, which I never really thought about it that way. All right. Well, since we're on the jiu-jitsu topic, what's your, and I know what you're going to say, but I wanted to ask anyway, what's your policy on rolling high, for example?
Well, you know exactly what I'm going to say. It's not cut and dry, you know, to be fair. I personally, I love it. I think it's great. I don't think it's a great idea to do all the time, but I think it can help.
Everything
You know,
in moderation.
Weed in and of itself, you know, it's so different for so many people. Like, what do you say? Every carriage has its passengers or whatever.
Yes.
Some people like weed, some people don't. What I would say is this: if you're first starting out, I would give it at least 6 months, because one thing that you don't do very well when you smoke weed and go to jiu-jitsu is learn. So I would never encourage people to smoke a joint and then go to class, like a regular class, because you're just not going to retain that much of the information. In my opinion, I mean, that's at least the way that I feel when I've done it in the past. The way I like to do it is go train hard all week, you know, do my drilling, do my specific sparring. And then on like Saturday or Sunday morning, when it comes time for open mat, where I'm just there to kind of be creative and try and put new stuff together, then I'll have a smoke and roll, or, you know, eat one of Shannon's cookies and roll. And I feel like I get a lot out of it because it takes a bit more of the ego out of the practice, and I'm more willing to give up position to try new stuff and not necessarily play my A game all the time and go into territory where my game might be a little bit weaker in order to see what I need to work on. And I think it's great fun. And another thing is, you know, after all the serious training of the week, it reminds me that this is supposed to be fun too. You know, it kind of puts me in a mindset where we're playing. You know, we're a bunch of kids wrestling around and play fighting and having fun and just having a great time with your friends. And so for me, it's been really positive in that. The reason that I say I would give it at least 6 months of consistent training is that when you first start out, you know, jiu-jitsu is so difficult. You know, you've got a bunch of guys, some of them a lot smaller and less athletic than you, that are just, you know, beating the shit out of you, and you're getting choked and armbarred, and you just don't know which way is up. And it takes 6 months of consistent training for most people to be able to do anything, you know, to put stuff together and start to have some things where they don't have to think too much about what they're doing. They just do it automatically. And that's what, you know, weed can be good for, is when you have some stuff that you do automatically and you're good at it, it becomes fun because you just go into autopilot and you have some fun. If you do it before that, you know, by all means do it. I'm not your dad. You do what you want, but it's not going to be that pleasant of an experience being high and getting smashed. So that's the way that I look at it. You know, train hard all week and then have a smoke and a good roll on the weekends. And I think it keeps it playful, keeps it fun, makes you more creative, takes a bit of the ego out of it. And that's it. Yeah, once a week is good for me.
I like what you said about taking the ego out, right? It's a very natural thing, especially when you step on the mats, especially in the beginning, even sort of for me, like I don't like to tap, but I remember what you said, you know, tap quick, tap often. So also keep that ego in check, because that's how you get injuries. And generally, I haven't seen, I mean, I haven't trained with many coaches, but I haven't seen many coaches would allow their student to maybe take a more advantageous position just so they can learn something, which I think is very valuable.
Yeah. I mean, we all have an ego, right? It's inevitable, and it's just it's up to you whether you drive that ego in a positive direction or a negative direction. And you know, when during the week, you know, when you're training more seriously and stuff, you know, even I'm more likely to not give up position You know, I might, like, for example, I might be on top of somebody, putting pressure, see the opportunity to go for something that may be slightly outside of my wheelhouse because I want to try it and give it a go. But then my ego is like, you might end up losing position and being on bottom, and then you're going to have to work your way out of a bad position and put it in. Whereas on the Saturday morning, you know, when I have a couple of puffs and go out, I'll be like, you know what, fuck, I'm going to try it. Who cares if I end up on the bottom? I'll get to work on my defense a bit more, you know, and it kind of changes your mindset that way. So I think in that way, it can be a really valuable tool. And in the beginning, you know, just you're going to have an ego, but try and have as little of an ego as you possibly can, because you're just going to get tapped all the time. And if you're really attached to not getting tapped, you're going to have a pretty rough time mentally. And I think I was quite lucky that when I first went to Nova Forza and started training properly, I just kind of knew. I just knew what was going to happen, and I kind of made my peace with it, and I loved it. Even though, you know, it was a little bit embarrassing, you know, I had some MMA fights, and I was a strong young guy, and I went in, and it can be difficult, but I think you get over that pretty quickly. There are some people who don't, you know, there are some people, you know, you see it all the time, big meathead guys walk into gyms and they get tapped out by somebody much smaller and they never come back. And then there's another kind of person who walks in, gets tapped out and goes, well, I have to learn this. I can't not learn this now. I mean, look how effective it is.
Yeah.
Just try as hard as you can to be that second kind of person, because you'll go a lot further.
It's a good piece of advice. Yeah, I never really thought about it that way. Like, someone's ego would be so fragile that they get tapped by someone who is seemingly smaller than them, maybe weaker or perceived to be weaker, and then they just don't come back. Never really thought.
So common. It just happens all the time.
Wow, just one of those things. It's part of jiu-jitsu, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so if people are actually starting jiu-jitsu, what's kind of like a couple of, you know, maybe top 3 tips or advices you'd give them? You know, if they're especially if they're afraid, because I actually started, I remember, because I was being afraid about getting into a kind of physical confrontation. I've done some boxing before, and I've done a little bit of Muay Thai for like a few months. But jiu-jitsu, because I'm such a big UFC fan, jiu-jitsu was always something like, oh, I need to try. But I was like afraid. Like, what would you give? What advice maybe would you give people?
Just expect it to be really difficult for like at least the first 6 months. Just go in there knowing that there are like 0.01% of people who walk into a jiu-jitsu gym and just pick it up. And those people are usually people who've like wrestled through high school their whole life, or, you know, they're a black belt in judo, and even those guys don't necessarily pick it up that quickly. It's a very different mentality. Expect it's going to suck, and kind of embrace that. If you go in there with any kind of expectation that you're going to be good from day one, those are the guys that leave and don't come back. You know, expect to be humbled, and listen to your coach. Don't ask a million questions all the time. You just have to take some things at face value. And I don't want this to come across as that it's wrong to ask questions, because it's not. It's just that in the beginning, you just don't know what you don't know. And those questions aren't necessarily going to be useful to you. One thing I would say is that it's very useful when you go in is to, like, if you're a white belt, like, try and befriend a blue belt, you know, when you go in there. Somebody who's not that far ahead of you, but that does, you know a lot more and has been through that. And they're going to be able to answer a lot of your questions and kind of help you along. And try and find yourself also a regular training partner who's on your level. Because if you have friends at the gym, you know, you're much more likely to come back. If you have somebody that you do 90% of your drilling with in class, you become accountable to one another. Well, if I don't show up, you know, he's not going to have his regular training partner. And if you've got somebody you get along with, it just makes sense that you're going to be more consistent with your training, you know, going back. So, you know, go in there expecting to be humbled and be okay with it. Know that it's going to teach you to be comfortable rather with being very uncomfortable. Your fingers are going to hurt from grabbing the gi. You know, your neck's going to hurt from, you know, lots of spazzy white belts grabbing hold of it and trying to put chokes on that they don't know how to do. You know, you're going to ache. But once you bust through that, it will be one of the most rewarding things that you do. Find yourself that jiu-jitsu calls them a battle buddy. You know, find that other person who's kind of started at the same time as you, where, you know, you both understand what each other's going through, and you kind of support each other, and they become your main drilling partner, and, you know, you roll with them a lot. That's really important. And again, try and find that person who's, you know, just a little bit above you on the ladder, just up on the next rung, who can kind of help you, because they understand fully what you're going through, because it wasn't long ago that they were there themselves.
Yeah, that's a great piece of advice. I remember, like, pretty much like you described a lot of the things that actually happened with me and Alberto drilling, and yeah, we were kind of starting from the same level, but yeah, a lot of blue belts there. Great advice. Listen, man, we can talk probably for another few hours without any preparation. I'm sure
You
we'll
get me
be
talking about jiu-jitsu, I'll be here all day.
Oh yeah, I'm sure you're like a wealth of knowledge in jiu-jitsu. I'm sure, you know, we can go on without any rehearsal for another few hours at least. Any final words that you want to say if people want to, you know, find more about you? Where do they go?
I mean, I'm not that interesting, but if you want to, I don't do Facebook because it's just too much politics on there for me. But I'm on Instagram at harder to kill BJJ. And, you know, if and when, like, I eventually open a school out here, I'll put up the information on there so people can see. And if you want to come and train, like, if you're ever in Tbilisi, just send me a message on Instagram. I've got some mats at my house, and we got a good school here. You know, come through and have a roll, and perhaps partake in a bit of the herbal inspiration, and we'll do some grappling.
Nice.
But yeah, I encourage everybody to give jiu-jitsu a try and start it, and check out that traditional stoicism stuff, that Chris Fisher podcast. And yeah, that's about it. It's good to talk to you, man. It's been too long.
Likewise. Thank you very much for your time, sir, and also everybody listening. Thanks very much. We'll see you in the next episode.